Hi, this is Gunnar Tapper for the Apache Travodin project. In this video, I show how to create the Travodin test environment. The first thing you need to do is to go to the Travodin contributor guide, which is available through the Travodin webpage and takes you to the Travodin wiki. In this case, we're going to look at how to create the test environments. So we go to that chapter which provides the instructions you need to perform this task. As you can see from the table of contents, we will first handle the prerequisites required to create the test environment. Then we will install a local Hadoop environment. In this case, I will cover how to install the Travodin test environment and the debug code on a pre-installed Hadoop in a separate video. And then we will simply verify that everything works. We will also look at how to manage that test environment, how to stop and start different components in this video. The procedure to create the test environment assumes that you've already gone through the steps to create the build environment and to build the Travodin source. The easiest way to check that you have a valid build is to go to the source directory and then source in the environment or variable definitions. And then you use the sqverse command to just check that you have everything set up. Next, we need to validate the prerequisites that are required before you can create a test environment. And as you can see here, our first step is to validate our passwordless SSH environment. And the first thing we need to do is to make sure we can SSH to the local host. And in my environment, you can. Next, we need to see whether we need to set up the SSH keys. There are two ways to do this. Either you add SSH keys to an existing environment, or you have to create the keys. I usually just check whether I have a SSH directory set up with the different keys defined, and we have in this case. This tells me that I need to add the SSH keys, not generate them. So what I do is I simply copy and paste this. Once I generated the SSH keys, I need to validate them. What I do is I check out my configuration in etc hosts, and I want to make sure I can SSH to these two names without having to use a password. So let's copy the first one, and then we simply SSH to that. First time it will ask me to add it to the authorized host file. Then I exit and I do it again, just to make sure I can log in without using a password. And then I do the same thing for the short name, which is Travodin here. Same procedure, and exit and do it again. And now I know that my SSH keys setup is working. Next, I need to deal with the system limits. I need to verify them. We have provided the recommended limits settings, which are here. And what you do is use the ulimit_a command to generate your own list, and then you compare them. In this case, you can see that there are differences, so we need to go and edit them. And we provide an example. What you do is you go in and edit etc security limits conf. So in my case, and this is a raw file, so it has nothing set up. So this happens to be adjusted to my environment, so you can simply copy this and then we paste it in at the end of the file, like so. And I save that. Now to make this take effect, I need to reboot the server, so I'm going to do that. And then we wait for that to complete. The reboot has completed, so let's log in again, and then we check our settings. And one thing you will note here is that my max user processes did not change even though I configured them with a different value, right? This is caused by a bug in some versions of Red Hat, and I wanted to show you that. So there is a file here that was added lately. If we cat that, we see that it overwrites it and sets this limit. So what we tend to do is we simply remove that file and then we'll reboot again. Well, I have to do that under sudo. We remove that file like so. And then you have to reboot the system again to make the changes take effect. The reboot has been completed, so I will log in and then I will verify my limits again. In this case, as you see, the max user processes get set to the value I specified. Now, I already did this, but it's always good to make sure that the fully qualified domain names work. So these are the ways to do this, right? First thing we do is use the hostname command. And you can see that it resolves to the fully qualified name, which is trafodium.novalocal. And then we can use the fqdn command argument to make sure we have correct resolution. And we do have that. So our system is set up right. If this doesn't work, then when you try to SSH to a name like that, it usually hangs. So if I try to SSH to this name, like so, it does log on like anything else. Now, if it doesn't work, then you will see it hang and then you have to use Control C to break it. And then you have to go in and change both your Etsy Resolve Conf and your Etsy hosts to make sure these settings match. And we have a procedure describing that in here and how to do that. That's all that's required for prerequisites. Next, we're going to install Hadoop environment and Trafodium. There are two ways to do that. One is to install the Trafodium debug source and all the test libraries and all that stuff on the pre-installed Hadoop environment, maybe your Hortonworks environment or Cloudera environment. I will cover how to do that in a separate video. So in this case, I'm going to use a script that's provided with Trafodium that creates a small Hadoop environment on the same machine you do your builds on, so you can do testing right then and there. It's always practical because you can do your bug changes and all, or your code changes and all that at the same time. That script is called install local Hadoop. So we scroll down to that. It has different parameters. On a standalone environment, it's usually just enough to run the script itself. In shared environments, you might have to deal with port issues. That's typically where you see issues, and there are different ways to deal with that. Use number ranges to pick random ports or specify port numbers. I'm going to do the simplest thing here, which is just run the install script itself. As you will see, we will have to install first the local Hadoop environment, and then we install the Trafodium components on top of that environment. Remember, Trafodium is an add-on to an Hadoop environment. So let's follow that procedure. The first thing I need to do is to change to my source directory and source in the definitions for the environmental variables. So I did that. That was the first step. Then I go to a directory with scripts. And there are a number of different scripts here. I'm going to run the install local Hadoop script. And what this does, it downloads from different Hadoop archives things like Yarn and Hadoop itself, HDFS, HBase, and I believe Hive, which is needed to test Trafodium, and it sets it up for you in a Cloudera-like environment. So I'm simply going to run this. And it takes a bit of time to do this, so I'm going to pause the video here and return when this has completed. Okay, the Hadoop environment setup has been completed. Next, I need to install the Travodian components. So I copy that command in and I run that too, which is fairly simple. So now I have set up an Hadoop environment and I have set up the Travodian environment on top of it. So what I need to do next is to verify that things are running. So I use the sv status command. And I can see that the 6 servers I'm supposed to have running are running. So I have my Yarn environment with the resource manager and the node manager. I have my HDFS environment with the name node, the data node, and the secondary name node. And I have my HBase environment with an HBase master. Remember, this is a single node environment. Now, the next step is here. It says open a new session, start Travodem executing sqgen and sqstart scripts. And that's important that I do that because what has happened here is that my whole environment has changed. So I'm going to duplicate this session and perform that step. And just to make it a little bit easier for us to see, I'm going to move that over here. So since I started a new session, I have to go to my source directory and source in the environmental variables again. And then I don't need to perform this step here because it's a brand new environment. This is typical when you change environment, but let's just follow the procedure step by step to make sure. So I sourced in my env sh. Now I'm going to change directory to mysqroot etc, and I'm going to remove the msenv file and it won't exist. Then I will go to the scripts directory and then I will run sqgen, which sets up all the environment for this specific situation. So this is really how you adjust your whole environment variables and all that kind of stuff to the specific installation. You set up private keys and all that kind of stuff. So we've done all that stuff. Now we're ready to start Travodian itself. And we use the sqstart command for that. And it takes a little bit of time. So again, as this starts going, I'm going to pause the video and we'll return once this step has been completed. The sqstart command has completed, and what we do as we run that script, we actually check the environment. So you can see here that everything is running. We have one DCS master configured and one running. We had one DCS server configured and one running. Then we have one MXO server, the master executor for the Travodian database, 4 configured and 4 running. So now all our services are running. The final step here we need to do is to initialize Travodian, the database itself. We use the SQL CI command interpreter for that. And if I can spell, it's easier. And once that starts up, we're going to use the initialize Travodian command to finish setting up all metadata and all that stuff that's required. So this takes a bit of time. So I will again pause the recording and will return when this is completed. The initialization step has completed, which means I will have a fully functional Travodian environment running. So next, we can go and learn about how to run the Travodian test suite. I will cover that in a separate video, and to manage the test environment itself. I'm going to go there because that documentation contains a simple way to validate the Travodian installation. So let's do that first. So I'm going to copy these commands and we'll just run them one by one. As you can see here, when we use the get schemas command, we see the CBase schema and other schemas we have there. Then we're going to create a table, a very simple table. And this is pretty much just a smoke test to make sure everything works. We will look at the definition of the table with the invoke command. Then we will insert some values into that table. We will do basic select from that table. And then we'll simply drop the table. And finally, we'll exit out of the SQL CI tool. SQL CI tool is really a development tool, and users use Traff CI, which has more functionality into it. So we can do a lot of things here. The local Hadoop environment has 4 scripts with it. It has sv start all, which starts the whole thing. We can stop it with the sw stop all. Sw status, of course, checks it, and then we have a remove script. So for our purpose here, we'll just use this command again. Now, for the Hadoop environment, the Travodin environment, we can do similar things. So we can stop and start and do a status check of the whole environment. So we do an SQ status. SQ check. And that tells us the environment. And there we can see that the distributed transaction manager, the real-time monitoring system, and all the other services are running. We can start and stop individual environments if we need to. So, and as you can see here, the system is simple. It's SQ and then start, stop, and check. So we can do, for example, DCS check to check the status of that, of the DCS system, and we can do the same thing for RMS. And if we want to stop it, of course, we use SQ stop, and then if we want to start it, we use SQ start. That's all there is to creating the Travodin test environment on the same server where you have your build environment. I hope this was helpful. This is Gunnar Tapper for the Travodin project. Have a nice day.